Melissa Lucashenko, welcome to Booktopia via Skype.
Thank you, Caroline.
Now, the novel is called Mullumbimby. It's set in Mullumbimby. It was originally called Barbed Wire.
Yeah, Barbed Wire was the working title. And interestingly, I had forgotten that by the time I got to the plot point which turns upon the barbed wire nest featured on the cover. Barbed wire is a very dominant part of rural life in northern New South Wales and other parts of country Australia. You don't live on the land and not encounter barbed wire in its various manifestations on a daily basis.
And barbed wire is a fantastic kind of metaphor, I guess, for the fact that the central theme of the book is about land as a commodity versus the idea of land as an expression of belonging.
It is. The book is about how various people, whether Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal, construct belonging to land. What country means to different people. And it's a word, with an almost limitless number of meanings. And yeah, barbed wire is, as I say in the book, that's one of the ways that non-Aboriginal Australia has gift-wrapped the continent, and given itself the present is by wrapping it up in that horrible stuff.
Exactly. Now let's just talk for a little moment about Jo, your central character, who is such a wonderfully realised and feisty woman. Tell us about Jo.
Jo, well, yeah, I guess I've stolen from a number of women with Jo. There's a lot of me in Jo, but there's also a lot of some of my sister girls in the Northern Rivers. Women who just seem to be indestructible, bad relationships, many small children, battling bureaucracies, battling poverty, and they're kind of the little engines that could, these black women, and I wanted to celebrate them in Jo.
Tell us a little bit about the Bundjalung sense of place and what it is that she sees when she looks at the country where she lives.
When Jo looks at the country, she has it's kind of an odd mixture of familiarity and distance. And the familiarity comes by knowing that her ancestors walked this land or land very close to it. She's in the situation of a very large minority of Aboriginal people, and that she doesn't know exactly where she's from, but she knows it's from close to there. So she's always interrogating the landscape. She's always saying, did my grandmother bathe in this creek? Did my great-grandfather walk those ridges on his way between ceremonies? And the answer to those questions is probably yes, but because there's not a definitive yes, Jo is to a certain extent alienated from the land. And as you discover, as the story progresses, there are other Aboriginal people who are not alienated from the land, but they may not be the Aboriginal people you expect to have those very close, ongoing connections.
One of the things that you use so brilliantly to kind of characterise Jo is she's got a fantastic sense of humour, so that even though she's dealing with big issues and problems and challenges, she also knows how to have a laugh about life.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, on the train, and I was thinking Aboriginal humour is, it's the humour not just of the underdog, but I guess the outer dog, and when you've got very little to lose, you are free to laugh, you're free to poke fun. There's a larrikinism in Aboriginal life that I didn't want to damp down, that I wanted to say, there's a joie de vivre almost in being the outsider and being able to just have a big belly laugh. I know a woman who, since the federal government cut single parent payments back to the level of the dole, no longer eats lunches. Her family no longer eats lunch. And she was at my place the other night and she was laughing her head off about life. And this is a woman who can't eat 3 meals a day.
Now, Jo is a woman who is single. She's a single mum, and she meets a guy called Twoboy, to whom she's kind of instantly attracted, but she's also very wary of the attraction because he's too good looking and he's just too everything. Tell us a little bit about Twoboy and what his kind of mission in the story is.
Well, Twoboy is the black prince of the story. He's meant to be hyper-masculine, but a good guy. Twoboy is on a quest to reclaim his tribal land. He's a Bundjalung man through his great-grandfather, who was removed into the native police unwillingly and involuntarily. And Twoboy's family have been away from country for 3 generations, and he comes back with his brother to reclaim the family inheritance, if you like, against quick and fierce opposition from the Bundjalung families who haven't been removed.
So this introduces the notion of conflict between Aboriginal people over a native title claim, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things I wanted to do in the book, my main purpose in the book is to say this is what it is to be Aboriginal on the east coast of Australia at this time. This is how we love and this is how we live and laugh. These are our lives. But an important second element was to say this is what native title is doing to Aboriginal communities. It's ripping us apart. I don't think it was intentional, but if the Australian High Court had wanted to put in place a process to destroy Aboriginal communities, they could hardly have done better than to set up the native title regime we've got.
So where does this leave how Jo views the land and her relationship to the land on which she lives as opposed to Twoboy?
Yeah, Jo has been raised slightly removed from Aboriginal mores and Aboriginal life, and so she, in a sense, is more open to the idea of working for wages and buying her land back through the white legal economic system. And she says, I think in chapter 3, that she's circumnavigated the entire hideous political fallout of colonialism. She's bought her farm back herself, cash on the stump, you fuckers, game over. Twoboy, on the other hand, is filled with righteous indignation at having been denied his land and his birthright, and he is going to pursue it through the courts. He has a legal mind, if you like. Jo is a mother and a person who's reached a bit more of a settlement with the idea of having to live by white rules. Twoboy's not interested in living by white rules, but he'll use them if it means getting his land back.
You said before that this is a book about how Aboriginal people today love and live their lives, and love is obviously a central theme of the book, not just between Jo and Twoboy, but Jo and Ellen, her daughter, Jo and Comet, her horse, and also her friends in the community. So can you talk a little bit about the different kinds of love that you wanted to explore?
Yeah, I think part of the dehumanising process around Aboriginal identity in Australia has been this idea that to the mainstream we are nothing more than angry two-dimensional figures, and of course that's not reality at all. We have emotional lives as rich, if not richer, than anyone else. And I just wanted to say, because you're poor and black doesn't mean that you don't fall in love. It doesn't mean that you don't love your kids and struggle with loving your kids. It doesn't mean that you don't have mates who are hugely important in your life. I think for poor people, mateship is more important than for people who have money to fall back on.
Now, Melissa, that's particularly interesting because for me, one of the most powerful lines in the book is when Twoboy says, "One day we will be living the good life." And I think you're making a really important point there about this poverty that you were just referring to, that poverty is a state that is not the norm for Aboriginal people. When you take the long-term view over 60,000 years, the current situation is relatively short-lived, isn't it?
Absolutely. And one of the Yugambeh aunties taught me this a long time ago, Auntie Mary Graham, who said, white people came to Australia and all these things happened, the theft of land, the rapes, the murders, the taking of children. And she said, but that's not the worst thing that happened, And I went, really? She says, the worst thing that happened is that white people brought a convict mentality that taught us that life is about struggle and survival. She said, life isn't about survival, life is about joy. And that was a real lesson to me.